So in the version of meiosis that you're looking at on this screen, you can see that the 4 daughter cells that were created, they have very little variation. So the 4 gametes that were produced by the process of meiosis, I've diagrammed here, only results in 2 different types of gametes. You either have on the left the gametes that have mom's DNA for all 3 types of chromosome, type 1, 2, and 3. And on the right, these 2 gametes that were produced, they contain all paternal DNA, the DNA that this individual inherited from their father. This is not a realistic view of how gametes are produced. Gametes the gametes that you produce are practically infinite in their variation. And so I want to show you how independent assortment and crossing over result in that almost infinite variation. Okay, so the key here is to look at how things take place during metaphase, during meiosis 1. Okay, so this is metaphase. Sorry, let me try to write that a little bit more neatly. Meiosis 1, metaphase. So the way that I lined up the tetrads is I put all of the maternal DNA, the DNA inherited by the mom of this individual, on the left side of the metaphase plate, and on the right side of the metaphase plate, you see in blue all the DNA that came from dad. And that's not the way that it necessarily happens. So let's change this a little bit. I'm actually just going to switch around. Well, you know what? Before we get started with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to throw some alleles in here. So let's say that there's a hair color allele here on chromosome type 1. And so across the board, chromosome type 1 that was inherited from the father of this individual coded for blonde hair. And that's going to go all the way through to the gamete. And the maternal allele for hair color coded for brown hair. Again, that's going all the way through to these gametes. All right, and now to make things interesting, let's also add in an eye color gene, and I'll start with that on chromosome type 3. So on the maternal chromosome type 3, we're seeing an allele that leads to green eye color. And on the paternal version, the version inherited from the father of this individual, there's a allele that leads to brown eye color. Okay. And so let's follow these through all the way until we get down to the gametes. And I'll show you why the world would be very boring or rather the gametes would be very boring if we didn't have independent assortment, or crossing over. Okay, so without independent assortment or crossing over, we end up with 4 daughter cells, 4 gametes, but there's only 2 possible combinations that can be passed on from this individual. This individual could pass on the alleles for brown hair and green eyes. Or, and that's for both of these, and both of these gametes over here would be blonde hair and brown eyes. So let's mix things up. Let's start with independent assortment. What I'd like to do is actually just switch the location of the type 1 chromosomes. And so I'm going to erase these. And instead I'll put that chromosome from mom on this side and the chromosome from dad on this side. And so this carries through. Let's carry this through the whole process here. Get my eraser. And pencil back in. So now mom's going to be on this side of the equation. The maternal DNA, I should say. And the paternal DNA is going to be on this side. Okay, and so I won't pencil in the alleles all the way through, but I want you to note that I'm about to erase the chromosomes that are down here, the chromosome type 1 that are down here. They're going to switch places, and so I will actually pencil in the alleles that are present this time. So here's now dad's DNA with the blonde hair allele, and mom's DNA with the brown hair allele. Unfortunately, we're back where we started, where instead of brown hair with green eyes, our only options are blonde hair with green eyes, on this side, or brown hair with brown eyes. Now, this is different from the parents. So, you know, if mom actually had brown hair and green eyes, her child is now able to pass on gametes that have her brown hair going along with the brown eyes that came from this individual's dad. So the result of crossing over, or the result of independent assortment, right? What's assorting independently here are these tetrads. And the result of independent assortment is that we get a mix of maternal and paternal chromosomes. In gametes. Running out of space here. Give myself a little bit more room. Okay, so that's independent assortment. Next, I'd like to show you crossing over. And so let's zoom in right here and do crossing over with this type 3 tetrad. So here's what crossing over looks like. Let's put in mom's DNA and dad's DNA and have them crossed over. And then let's actually complete the crossing over process. And so what you see is an equal exchange of genetic information between the non-sister chromatids of this homologous pair. So you see that there now what we have are chromosomes that are a mix of maternal DNA and a mix of paternal DNA. All right, so the result of crossing over a mix of maternal and within a single chromosome. So independent assortment gave us a mix of maternal and paternal chromosomes in our gametes. And crossing over gives us a mix of maternal and paternal DNA within a single chromosome. And so let's look at the result there, allele-wise. So remember that mom was passing on, let's see, we're talking about eye color here. Mom was passing on a allele for green eyes, while dad was passing on, or the paternal DNA had an allele for brown eyes. And so if we move that, I'm going to skip way ahead here. If we move that all the way down here, what you'll see is, let's take out the top of that one and the top of that one and shuffle them. Brown, and mom's was the red, represented with red with the green eye allele on it. So before we only had two versions of eye color and hair color being passed on. But that is not the case anymore. Let's see, hopefully. Blonde with green eyes is still all the way on the left. And now this one, whoops, I don't want to erase. I do want to erase one more thing though. Yep. Now we have blonde with green eyes, blonde with brown eyes, brown hair, green eyes, and brown hair, brown eyes. So now we have all four possible combinations of hair color and eye color being represented in the gametes. And that is thanks to the variation that was added when we included independent assortment and crossing over in our understanding of meiosis. So let me answer the review questions. Okay, explain independent assortment of chromosomes during meiosis. Basically, I just want you to know that during metaphase of meiosis 1, the way that the maternal and paternal DNA end up lining up across that metaphase plate is completely random. So this pair, this homologous pair, doesn't depend on this homologous pair, and it doesn't depend on this homologous pair. They're all arranging themselves independently from the other chromosome types. So type 1 chromosomes are independent of type 2, are independent of type 3 in how they arrange along that metaphase plate. The next question is, how does independent assortment contribute to the genetic variation found in gametes? And so that's this explanation up here at the top. Independent assortment, it gives us a mix of maternal and paternal chromosomes in gametes, but it doesn't mix up the DNA within chromosomes. The next question is, which units of DNA are exchanging material during crossing over? Okay, and so it's the non-sister chromatids. The non-sister chromatids are exchanging genetic information. And the last question is, how does crossing over contribute to the genetic variation found in gametes? And the answer there is that there's a mix of maternal and paternal DNA within a single chromosome.